Morning, guys, and I feel like this is like the core family right here. We're missing a few people, but I think last time we kind of talked at the level that I want to talk today. Kind of the same thing happened. It was like, family meeting. This kind of like family meeting talk because we're going to just talk about our strategy and so it's still, the Lord's Day, it's still the preaching of God's Word. We're just going to try to zero in on some strategy-related stuff. So we're not back in the book of John yet. We've been studying paragraph by paragraph through the book of John, and it's been wonderful. We won't be back next week either because High Plains is coming. We won't be back in John the following week because Aaron Santini will be teaching. And then February 8th, finally, we will be back in the book of John. But this morning, we're going to talk about vision again, which is what we talked about a little bit last week. And I want to do it for a couple of reasons. One is that I just want to kind of keep the vision in front of us, who we are, what we're doing, how we're trying to accomplish it, why we're here. We're not interested in, none of us in this room are interested in this becoming some sort of ritualistic meeting that we just come to each week and we just start attending church merely. We are attending a meeting right now, but we don't want this to just be kind of this visionless thing. We are actually trying to do something here, and what we're trying to do extends beyond what we're trying to do right here this morning, right? So I want to kind of keep it in front of us, and I also hope that we can be excited about what God is doing at Choice City Church. We don't only want to know what it is that we're doing, but we want to be excited about what we're doing. And so I hope that this morning God will use our time to help us so that the embers don't grow cold in our hearts, that the things that are... here's what happens. The holiday season, and as I've talked to other pastors, this is very typical. The holiday season produces a kind of a stutter step in the church's life, in the sense that you lose your stride. You can lose your momentum, and it's because of some great things. But there's also a need to kind of like rally back together and remember what we're doing and try to stir the heart up again, so that we don't get into some sort of disengaged autopilot mode. That's probably not good for any church. It's especially not good for a church of this size because autopilot, there is no autopilot. It just doesn't happen if we're not engaged. And so we want to remind ourselves of what we're doing, and we want to re-engage in our calling. For those of you who were around in the summer and you went through the partnership class, you may recognize that our vision looked something like this. There it is. There's our vision. Actually, it looked more like this. And when we talked about vision, when you talk about vision, what do we mean by vision? Some of this will be a recap from what we did on Wednesday night. When you're talking about vision, the way that I think about it, at least, is, okay, what am I seeing that back up. That's what I'm seeing. Why are you doing this? Maybe I'll just drop that. Maybe I'll pull the battery out of this thing and just let it go. Can you pull the battery out of that for me? I need a coin. All right, vision. Maybe the Lord's saying, stop going to this screen and talk about vision. What am I seeing? When you talk about visionary leadership, what is it that we see that I want you to see so that you have some sense of vision for where we're going and what we're doing and what our mission is and what our strategy is and what our structure is, And you have to have some ability to present that to people so that people have something in front of them that allows them to pursue it, so that there's some motivation for Choice City Church. Vision. And so when we talked about vision, I kind of created this mind map, and it was this beautiful thing. That was a joke. And each one of these things had a bunch of branches coming off of it, and it was just kind of this massive vision that I was like, okay, I want you to see this, and we unpacked it for 6 weeks in the partnership class. And that's a great thing, because that means we got a lot of things to say. There's a lot of depth to what we're thinking here. But the problem is, if you have to have 6 weeks of people's time in order for them to understand your vision, then you're probably not going to have a lot of people stick around to see the vision. So that takes a long time. And so through the help of some different guys, Gary Sykes perhaps especially, and some other guys who just were kind of processing with me, they said, why don't we try to find some way to say something that kind of functions as an umbrella under which all this other stuff can fit, so that you can state, like have a vision statement that captures everything enough that you can say it, and it's right there, and it's easy to remember, and everything works underneath that as the umbrella. So you probably can't read that. We created a vision statement, and for probably the last couple months, it has said, Choice City Church is a discipleship community passionately centered on the gospel. You guys remember that? I put it up on the screen last week. I continued to press into that, and others continued to press into that. They said, maybe we could even tighten it up a little bit more, and so we just removed one word, basically. So our vision statement then, and I think we'll just park here now, is a gospel-centered discipleship community. What are we? Who are we? What are we doing? We're a gospel-centered discipleship community. And every word in there you could just unpack. You could unpack it for 6 weeks. So it sounds maybe on the surface kind of general, but we don't mean something general by it. We mean something very specific by it. And last week we looked at one element of this mission, and it was, or of the vision, the discipleship mission. I don't know if I ever mentioned it by name, but that's what we talked about last week. We exist, or our mission is, to be and to make disciples who have a life-transforming passion for the glorious God revealed in the gospel of Jesus Christ. The mission of Choice City Church is a fairly simple two-part strategy. I talked about last week, it's a fairly simple two-part recipe, is what I said. It's got 2 parts to this recipe. Number one, we want to help, we want to be and we want to help others be disciples who, number one, look at Jesus, and number 2, worship Him. If you want to just break down, what's our mission? I want to help you look at Jesus. I want to help you set your eyes on Jesus. I want to set my eyes on Jesus. I want to get my focus on Him. I want to behold Him. I want to see God revealed in Jesus. We have a glorious God. We have an amazing God. He speaks galaxies into existence with the words of His mouth. He is eternal. He is powerful. He is faithful. He is glorious. He is the supreme in all things good. He is wonderful. And that God is on display in Jesus in a way that He's not on display anywhere else. He's on display in the creation. He's on display in the church. But He is on display in Jesus in unparalleled glory. I want to see Him. And I want you to see Him. And we should worship. Because if you really do see Him for who He really is, it will... if God opens your eyes, worship. And so it's a fairly simple 2-part recipe. I want to see Jesus. I want to help others see Jesus. And I want to worship Jesus. And I want others to worship Jesus too. A fairly simple 2-part recipe. That's what we're doing here. And the reason this is our mission is because it corresponds to God's mission. That's what God is doing in the universe. We talked about the revelation of God in Jesus for the sake of the celebration of God. What's God doing in the world? He is putting himself on display, and he is creating a people to see and celebrate the beauty of who he is. He wants us to know him and to delight in him. That's what God's doing in the world. That's what God's doing in the making of this world, the creation. That's what God is doing in redemption. That's why God sends his Son, is to display his glory and to purchase a people who can behold that glory and enter into communion with that God and celebrate him in relationship for eternity. And therefore, our mission at Choice City Church is to be and make disciples who have that passion for that God. We want to take part in what God is doing. We're just taking our cues from him and what he's doing in the universe and saying, let's just line up our vision with what God is doing and play our role in what God's mission is in this world. And I want you to think for just a moment about God's zeal for this mission. How much energy, how excited God is to do what he's doing in the world. Consider that God created this world for the sake of revealing to humanity himself so that humanity might enjoy the infinite delights of knowing him. And in order to ensure our participation in that, he gives his Son. To ensure that you and I can sit at the table with God and know him forever and celebrate him and be brought in as his people to know him. I'm thinking of Jesus when he cleanses the temple, and the disciples remember that the psalmist said, "Zeal for your house has consumed me." Jesus is so zealous for making a way for God's people to come into his presence at the temple. Zeal for the house of God. Zeal for a place for God's people to come and be in his presence forever. Jesus has great zeal for the accomplishment of the mission of God, of making a way for us to become worshipers of God and to be his family. Consider the zeal of God to make you family with God. We are the family of God. And God has a passion to make it happen. Jesus had a passion to make it happen. And not only have we been brought in, but we have been commissioned as agents through whom God intends to advance that mission on the earth so that other people can join us in the family. Other people can join us in the celebration. Nobody on the planet, think about this, nobody on the planet will enter into and enjoy fellowship with our God together with us unless or until people like us, Christians, go into the world and do the work of harvesting those, in Jed's words, not yet disciples. Nobody will come in unless people like us go out. It won't happen. Nobody else is going to tell them about Jesus. That's our job. That's our calling. And nobody else gives a rip. They don't know it. That's our privilege. So not only did he bring us in, but he's now sending us out. Consider what you're a part of, and consider that God has done something amazing to bring this specific group of people together here at Choice City Church. People coming from Iowa, California, New York, Virginia, New Mexico, the distant land of Loveland. And people here, right here in Fort Collins, pulling us all together. God gathers us together from around the nation to be part of Choice City Church so that we can be and make disciples here in Fort Collins, so that we can be a part of God's mission. Why do you think you're here? Because God has zeal for the accomplishment of his mission. He's doing something. It wasn't your desire. You weren't. How many of you 2 years ago or even 1 year ago were thinking, I just want to be a part of a church plant in Fort Collins that meets it for Mary? You had no zeal for this. Most of us didn't. But God did. And so he incorporated you into something you wasn't maybe even on your radar. It brings you from other states to be a part of it. The gospel is spreading among the nations of the world, and God has sent missionaries here to Fort Collins, from Jerusalem to Samaria, or Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, to the ends of the earth. Well, guess where we are right now? This is the ends of the earth. The gospel has moved forward, and of course it's still moving. Needs to go back to the 1040 window. It's still moving, but God sent missionaries here, Fort Collins, so that we might be a part of what he's doing in the world. If you're sent by God, let's think about this. What if you were sent by God to be a missionary in Kazakhstan, and you land on the ground there, and you've been commissioned, and you've been sent by your local church, and you raise support, and you're a missionary, right? This is your job now. How high is your radar going to be for the mission of God? God brought me here. God is on the move. I am a part of something. Show me, Lord. Show every conversation, right? You're getting coffee at the awesome Kazakhstan coffee shop, and you're thinking like, I wonder what the Lord's doing. Every conversation, right? Your radar is high. Well, guess what? You've been sent here. You've been sent to Fort Collins as a missionary. There is a mission. You're an agent of that mission, and you're part of a church plant. You're part of this new work. It's not even like you're just on the ground and like, wow, maybe I better start a Bible study or something, or I don't know, what's God going to do? Like, there's already something happening, and it wasn't our idea. This is God's idea. He's making it happen. It's already going. It's already launching. It's already flying. It's off the ground. And you're a part of it. Do you realize what you're a part of? Do you realize what God has done in the revelation of himself in Jesus, securing for you your salvation, pulling you into the family, sending you to Fort Collins, putting you in a church plant, so that you can be a part of some great work that God is doing right now? Do you realize what a privilege it is to be a part of this? Consider God's zeal for it. Are we mindful of the mission that God is on? Why we've been brought here, to be to make disciples with a passion for Jesus. Be disciples, make disciples, look at Jesus. It's a pretty simple two-part recipe. I want to know him. I want you to know him. I want them to know him. It's a simple recipe. But as we talked about last week, the cooking is kind of complicated. Actually, how do you if I'm supposed to be this person with this passion for Jesus and help others with their passion for Jesus, the fact is my heart is this complicated mixture of idolatrous desires and things that I love more than God, and I'm not even sure what's going on in my heart all the time. How do I navigate my heart, my passions? The fact that I have a worship disorder complicates this very simple recipe. How do I navigate the hearts of other people in this church? How do I navigate the hearts of other people who don't even know Jesus in this city? How do we get our attention on Jesus? How do we help other people see Jesus in the gospel? How do we live as gospel-centered, disciple-making disciples when we're on the job site, or when we're schooling our children, or when we're drinking French press coffee, or when we're playing golf, or when we're at the movies, or mowing the lawn, or when we're gathering for worship, or when we're scattered into this city? How does the revelation and the celebration of this great God connect to our daily and to our weekly lives? How do we take part in this mission? How do we cook the simple recipe? And what I want to talk about the rest of this morning is the strategy that this local church, not necessarily every local church, but the strategy that this local church is utilizing for the sake of equipping our people to faithfully engage in the discipleship mission so that Jesus is increasingly glorified in every nook and cranny of our lives. What is our corporate strategy for helping one another be disciples, both as a corporate people and as individuals? And what's our corporate strategy for helping our people make disciples? How are we going to do that? So this is another piece of our vision. Pop. Our strategy. Here's our little statement. Here's how we see the pursuit of the discipleship mission. Disciples making disciples in gospel-centered communities that gather and scatter and multiply. Disciples, want to be a disciple? Making disciples in gospel-centered communities. And those communities that gather together, they scatter together, and they multiply. That's what we want to talk about today. How's this church going to do it? Here's how this church is going to try to make this happen. We're going to try to pursue the mission in this way. It's by means of gathering and scattering and multiplying this community environment in which we're going to pursue making disciples together. Now, it's not the only way to do it, and I'm not even saying that this is the best way to do it. I don't know of a better way to do it. If I did, we'd be doing that. But this is how we're going to do it. This is our vision. This is our strategy for pursuing the mission. And to be honest, this is where we're headed in 2015. This is what we're doing in 2015. It's our agenda for the year. This is our agenda for leadership development. This is our agenda for helping people to get connected and plugged in. How do we care for people at Choice City Church? Mainly, it's in this environment. How do we impact our city? Mainly, it's in this environment. Everything that we're doing is the attempt to execute this strategy. Figure out how to do this well. Again, the cooking may be complex. It may be difficult to learn how to do this well, but this is what we want to do. So, if you believe that God has brought you here to be a part of His mission at Choice City Church, then I am asking you to co-labor with me in the implementation of this strategy. I'm asking you to think through it with me this morning, and on Wednesday, I hope all of you can make it on Wednesday. I'm asking you to learn together with me how to do this. How are we going to be disciples? How are we going to make disciples? How are we going to have community? How do we gather and scatter? And how do we make this thing multiply? And if it's going to happen, you're going to have to buy in to three things, I think. You're going to have to buy into three concepts that drive this strategy. Three things that we believe are necessary in order for discipleship to flourish. And the first key concept that you have to buy in, if this is going to work, you have to buy into, is that discipleship flourishes, number one, in gospel-centered community context. A gospel-centered community context is required for discipleship to flourish. And I say a gospel-centered community because, as I talked about last week, discipleship requires this continuous battle to try to center our lives on Jesus. And so we want to have gospel-centered community where we're helping each other center our lives on Jesus so that He's like the sun at the center of the solar system and is kind of gravitationally has enough gravitational pull to keep all the other planets in order. Okay. And since I spent so much time on it last week, I'm not really going to spend any time on it this morning. What I'm going to focus on right now is the words community context. I submit this assertion to you for your consideration. Think about this. Community is the optimal context for nourishing discipleship. Gospel-centered community makes disciples stronger, I think, than any other context. Usually we don't think of discipleship as a community project. I don't think we typically consider discipleship a community context. We mostly think of it as a one-on-one event, or sometimes we think of it as a teacher-pupils event, like what's happening right here. And that's fair. This is a piece of discipleship that's taking place right now, but primarily, I don't think that should be our category for discipleship. Primarily, I think community should be our category for how discipleship takes, or the context in which discipleship is going to flourish. Consider the interdependent community dynamic that is implied in the imagery of the church being a body. You know how Paul talks about how the church of Jesus Christ is referred to as the body of Christ in 1 Corinthians chapter 12. Listen to Paul. To each is given the manifestation of the Spirit for the common good. Everybody in here has gifts that the Spirit has given to you, and they're for the sake of what? Let me read it again. To each is given the manifestation of the Spirit for the common good. You have gifts, and it's for the purpose of the common good. Okay, everybody needs you. And you need everybody, because this whole thing needs each part. Paul goes on in 1 Corinthians 12:12. He says, just as the body is one and has many members, and all the members of the body, though many, are one body, so it is with Christ. We are all very different, but we are one collective body, and so everybody needs everybody else in some way. We may not even be perceptive to all the ways in which we need one another, but the fact is, the Word of God tells us you do. We need each other. And so when we set out to be a church, if we're going to be enthusiastic about discipleship, I want to make disciples. Great commission, right? It means that we have to diligently pursue a community context in order for that to work. That has to be an objective. You have to buy in to the need for community if you want discipleship to flourish. And our primary mechanism for creating that community dynamic in Troy City Church is what we call our gospel communities. We've only got one right now. It's the gospel community. But gospel communities, we hope to multiply this thing too, so that we've got gospel communities. We want to learn how to use these communities, these gospel communities in particular, as the main structural instrument for creating a genuine community environment. Now, I'm not saying that it's working yet necessarily. I do think it's largely working for many people. I'm not saying we don't need to figure out how to make it work better, but what I am saying is this is the mechanism we're going to use, and we're going to try to refine it so that it works well, so that we can utilize the gospel communities to create a community context for creating discipleship in our church. We want to learn how to use it so that we really do have in Troy City Church a genuine community environment in which we're functioning together as a family, as a body of brothers and sisters who love each other and value one another, and we're committed to one another, and we're living life with one another so that we're able to engage with one another in all those one another commandments in the New Testament. There's a ton of them. And apparently we're supposed to be doing all this stuff for one another, and we need community in order for that to happen. And we want to use the gathering and the scattering and the multiplying of our gospel communities to produce that dynamic in our church and to spread that dynamic in our church. And that's why I put so much emphasis on the gathering and the scattering dynamic at Choice City. I put a lot of emphasis on it, obviously, in the gospel community as well, because I just don't think true community is possible unless we gather and scatter together. I don't think it's possible. I don't think it's going to happen. We simply cannot live in a true community dynamic with one another if we relegate our relationships with one another to weekly meetings. That's not community. My daughter's ballet class meets more often than Choice City Church's official gatherings. It's a class. It's not a community. We are not a community if you come on Sunday mornings and you come on our gather nights every other Wednesday. That's not community. How are we going to do all these one another's if that's all that our relationships consist of, right? It takes more than a formal meeting. It takes a willingness to learn how to actually live life together. Yes, we do meet together. And then we have to leave and scatter together. We got to get together out there if we're going to be a real community so that we can taste and see and participate in life together as disciples. And I can see how you're actually living it out. You don't know how I really live it out. I stand up here every week and I do this really spiritual thing and I teach you God's word. Like, man, you must be really spiritual. Well, it might help if you spend some time with me and you know what it looks like to live it out. I need to hang out with you, and not just here this morning, but this afternoon. I need to see your life. I need to be in you so I can learn from you. What does it look like to be a disciple and a dad? I need to watch you as you shepherd your child through conflict, or interact with your neighbor, or handle your frustration last week as the Broncos are eliminated from the playoffs. Share with you what I've been thinking about, what I've been learning. You can share with me about what you've been reading, and we're having lunch together, and we're living life together. I can't learn everything I need to know about how to be a disciple, and I can't do everything that I need to do in order to live out the life of discipleship if the only time I get together with you is at our church meetings, right? Are you with me? Do you hear what I'm saying? And I can't learn everything I need to know about how to be a disciple, and I can't do everything I need to do as a disciple if I don't come to the meetings. You need them both. You have to be there, here and there, for one another. I need to live in community with you, and not just you as an individual, but as a family. I need to live in community with you guys. It's a whole team of people in one another's lives as friends and as mentors, counselors, and comforters, and we're all gifted in a bunch of different ways, and we're all contributing to one another's growth. There's this one guy that I've been spending some time with, and I've been going through some theology with him, right? We're reading this theology, and sometimes I get together and we just hang out and do some other stuff too. But there's this other guy who says, hey, I've been thinking about this guy, and I've been wondering if anybody's ever taught him how to pray. What would you think of me reaching out to him and maybe teaching him how to pray and memorize some scripture? That's awesome, because I'm not doing that. I'm not helping this guy. I cannot be everything this guy needs in order for him to grow as a disciple. Some of the community has to step in from another angle, sees things that I don't see. That's a great idea. This is exactly what this guy needs. Community. And this is how the church, as a community, grows up in every way into Him, who is the head, into Christ, from whom the whole body, joined and held together by every joint in which it is equipped, when each part is working properly, makes the body grow so that it builds itself up in love. Ephesians chapter 4, verses 15 and 16. Discipleship flourishes in a gospel-centered community context. You have to buy into that. And it's not only the optimal environment for our own growth as believers, but the gathering, scattering, gospel-infused Christian community is the optimal environment for displaying Christ to those who don't know him yet as well. It's not just good for us, it's the optimal environment for exposing them to him. And I don't necessarily mean that our unbelieving neighbors and family members and co-workers will love coming to our meetings, our gatherings, or our scatterings, our scatter nights. So don't depend on the scatter night as the main context for scattering together. Scatter night is training wheels. Teach us how to take one step outside the door of the church and hang out together. And learn how to be together without having to have an official meeting time Sunday mornings. We're going to step one step out of the building, and we're going to hang out together. And as my friend Gary McQuinn would say, we're going to learn how to hang out with one another until we actually become friends. We spend time together because we actually like each other. Scatter night is just one little attempt for us to try to say, hey, let this be practice, but scattering together must go beyond that. Your neighbors, they're going to pick up really quick on okay, so every Wednesday you have a Bible study, and then the other Wednesday you would just hang out with your friends. Do you want me to come to hang out night? Are those friends the same people that you're hanging out with at the Bible study? I mean, it doesn't take a rock. Who said this in here? Does it take a rocket surgeon? Don't count on that being the context where you're just going to reach out to all these people. That it's hopefully people will come. It's a great environment. It should be non-threatening. But more than anything, hopefully we're just learning how to hang out together. So that in natural life, we're spending more time together. So, when I say that the gathering, scattering, gospel-infused Christian community is the optimal environment for displaying Christ to those who don't know Jesus, what I mean is that the genuine community of men and women who love Jesus and lay their lives down for one another and spend time in one another's lives and time in one another's homes, it is going to inevitably allow our unbelieving friends and our unbelieving family members and our unbelieving coworkers to cross paths with the Christ-adoring community that we're always spending time with. And if you're like me, you're thinking, okay, it would be good to expose some of these people to the broader picture of who Jesus is, not just me. Because if you're like me, you're thinking, the people that I hang out with are actually really beautiful. You're only getting Jesus through me, but the Jesus shining through these other people, at times it looks much better than this. Who wouldn't be intrigued about Jesus after spending some time with Jacques and Kate? Right? Get some Jacques in your neighborhood. Okay? Let your unbelieving parents meet some of the people in this room. Let God use the community to help you in your pursuit of the mission in your scattered spheres of influence. Discipleship flourishes. Both being and making disciples, it flourishes in the community context. And in order to execute the strategy for discipleship at Choice City Church, I'm asking you to buy into that with me. Buy into it. We need it. And if you don't buy into it, we're not going to have it. What that translates to is committed participation. That's what it looks like when a person buys it. Committed participation in the gathering, in the scattering, in the community. That's the first key concept. Second key concept that drives our strategy, that you have to buy in for this to work, is that discipleship flourishes in gospel, or with a gospel-centered investment mentality. Once again, I'm not going to talk about gospel-centered right now. The main point I want to make here is that with Jesus and his agenda at the center of our lives, we have to be people who are intentional about investing in relationships with other people. We see this investment mentality in the ministry of Jesus himself as he prayerfully chooses to prioritize building close relationships with 12 men. Luke 6:12. In these days, he went out to the mountain to pray. And all night he continued in prayer to God. And when day came, he called his disciples and chose from them 12. The apostles. Jesus spent some time figuring out, who does God want me to invest my life in? Because you can't invest your life in everybody, because if you try to invest your life in everybody, you're going to invest your life in nobody. We've all seen we've all heard the story of the pastor, right, who is investing his life in all these people in his church, and really nobody knows him all that well, including his family. It takes prioritizing, figuring out who should I invest in. Of those 12 men, there were 3 men in particular who got specialized attention from Jesus. Peter, James, and John. It was Peter, James, and John who were there at the Mount of Transfiguration. It was Peter, James, and John who were brought into the house when Jesus raised the daughter of the synagogue leader, Jairus, from the dead. It was Peter, James, and John in Gethsemane when Jesus pulled aside to pray. He brought them with him. These guys were Jesus' best friends. They were his closest friends. They were the guys that he was especially investing in. So he's pouring into 12, and he's especially pouring into 3. And it was because Jesus had an investment mentality. He had recognized that there are people in his life that God wants him to prioritize, and that means he needs to make sure that he gets time with those people. He's going to go out of his way to invest in them. He makes decisions so that he can invest in these people. He makes these men a priority. He sacrifices his comforts for the sake of pouring into them. He sacrifices energy for the sake of pouring into them. He sacrifices time with other people so that he can pour into these guys. And what I want us to see here is that discipleship flourishes when people intentionally invest effort in relationships that God wants them to prioritize in their lives. The flourishing of discipleship in our families, let's say, like your spouse and your children. You want that to flourish? If you've got a spouse and children, you should want that to flourish. It requires that you're going to have to make a priority of those people. The story of the pastor whose family goes down the tank. What happened? He didn't prioritize his family. He did not have an investment mentality with regards to the people that God is calling him to primarily invest in. The flourishing of discipleship with an unbelieving neighbor or a coworker, it requires investment in the relationship. It's not going to happen otherwise, right? The flourishing of discipleship in our gospel community, or communities, hopefully very soon. In this church, it's going to, in general, require us to invest in relationships with other people in that gospel community. Now, that doesn't mean you can't invest in other people in the church by any means. It just means, hey, let's take a look at the community, the immediate community that God has placed you in, and are you doing anything to say, you know what, I should try to get more time with some of these people because they're my family, and or because they're in my gospel community, or because I'm their coworker, or just taking some time to think about who should we be investing in a gospel community. just mindful of what about one couple that I could just make sure that over the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks, one couple, that I'm just going to go out of my way to reach out to invest in, to get some time with, get some lunch together. Just being mindful of the people that you're called to invest in. And if we don't have an investment mentality with those relationships, then we're undoubtedly not going to experience vibrant community in that gospel community, for example. A vibrant community is an organic phenomenon. We want community at Choice City Church. We want it to be organic. We don't want to have every single event planned out, put on a Google Calendar, shot out from Pastor Jeremy's email, and set up an event. We want it to be more organic. Sometimes we're doing that kind of thing, but if we're really a community, it's more organic than that. But a vibrant, organic community doesn't mean that creating organic community is an effortless thing. It takes a lot of effort because it takes people investing in other people's lives. As Dusty said the other day, a flourishing garden is organic. But it takes a lot of work to create a flourishing garden. And that's what we want. It's going to take a lot of work. People saying, hey, I'm going to invest in this person who's on the outskirts of our community. There are people on the outskirts of Choice City Church. I'm not going to name any names, but if you just thought about this, you could say, hey, I bet I could give a little bit of attention to so-and-so. What an encouragement that would be. To just invest. If we're not experiencing community, the first thing that I would question is whether or not people are investing in one another's lives. I think that's essentially what it comes down to. Healthy relationships, healthy gospel communities, healthy churches are not the result of haphazard efforts of people who aren't dependable and who aren't making any concerted effort to prioritize or invest in relationships with other people. The fact is, if we're going to be disciples who make disciples, if we're going to be on board with God's mission, and if we need community in order for that to happen well, then we're going to have an investment mentality. We're going to have to think about, we're going to have to pray about who it is and what it is that God is calling us to invest in. I remember when we were at the Crossing, and we just started our life group, and Mike Blackwood was this guy who kind of, he was like, I think I want to be a part of this, and he decided to give up Wednesday night hockey so that he could be part of the life group. That's an investment mentality. These are people that God is calling him to invest in, and so he's saying no to something else in order to prioritize these relationships that God wanted him to be investing in. Now, I think he still plays hockey on Sunday nights and on Fridays. So, I'm not saying you have to give up everything, but you have to try to figure out what is it that I'm supposed to be pouring into. And some of those things actually are going to be pretty simple if you just take some time to think about it. If you've got a spouse, your spouse is one of them. If you've got kids, your kids are people you need to be investing in. Think about people in your gospel community. Like I said, 1 or 2 people. Think about people on the outskirts, maybe one person on the outskirts. Think about a coworker, a neighbor that you're connecting with. And you might have at the end of thinking about that 4 or 5 people that you're like, these are the people I need to be investing in my life right now. So maybe for the next, make it your effort for the next month. You're like, I'm going out of my way to connect with these people. It takes some, and then you're going to have to make effort to make it happen. But you're not going to have a flourishing discipleship community if people aren't invested. And I don't just mean 1 or 2 people. I mean everybody really has to be on board. You have to buy into this. Imagine that. A church that buys into the community context and a church that buys in to an investment mentality. And I think we're well on our way to flourishing disciple-making disciples. The third key concept, and I know I'm going long, or at least I feel like I'm going long. This is the last one. This gospel-centered guiding principles. You got to buy in to this concept if we're going to collaborate and do this discipleship thing well at Joyce City. So here you've got you've got Jesus-loving disciples, and let's say we're bought into the notion of community, and we're bought into the notion of investing in other people. And now, how do you approach those relationships with those people you're trying to invest in? And I have 7 guiding principles taken from what I perceive as the discipleship strategy of Jesus. And I'm sure that Jesus did more than 7 things. But here are 7 things that, at least, that Jesus did that create what I think is a holistic kind of mentality when you're thinking of approaching the project of discipling one another. And many of you may know these 7 principles by the acronym DEEP-CM. It has changed. Some of you don't know what I'm talking about. Some of you do. And so I won't go into the details. It's changed. It's changed to GADEP-CM. And it looks like this. 7 guiding principles. I'll walk through them. Gospelization, association, demonstration, education, participation, cultivation, and multiplication. A lot of times when we think of making disciples, we think of one of these things, maybe 2 of these things. We think of making disciple as maybe gospelization, speaking the gospel into one another's lives, evangelism. Or we think of it as education. We're going to sit down and read through a book together. Jesus did those things. And he did a lot of other things. And what we've got here is not a curriculum that we need to take each other through. And what we've got here is not a method of how to do discipleship together. What we've got here are some guiding principles that help you have some things on the radar so that as you're investing in relationships with other people, you know that in order for discipleship to flourish, the learning process is multifaceted. And we have to learn how to see the different angles that are important for the development of a person's soul as a disciple of Jesus. We'll start with gospelization. What I mean here is, well, let me first say, prayerful and loving. Okay, so we're lovingly pursuing all of these things. Number 1, gospelization, meaning we're speaking gospel-laden truths into one another's lives. Which could be speaking the gospel for the first time to somebody who doesn't know Jesus, or it could be Jacques or Dusty coming to me and just giving me encouragement after a failure of some sort and ministering to me about the fact that there's no condemnation and treating me with grace and having kind of a gospel-infused mentality and gospel-infused words that are coming out and spilling into the lives of one another in the community. We want to be a gospel-centered community. We want to know how to tactfully point people to Jesus and remind one another of who Jesus is. We want to learn how to do this well. And I've kind of put that right at the center because we want to be gospel-centered, right? And in its Broncos colors, which you may have picked up on. It has nothing to do. We want to know how to do it. Jesus did this repeatedly. Point people to Jesus. Come to me, you who are weary and heavy laden, and I will give you rest. He's just pointing people to himself. I am the bread of life. I'm the good shepherd. I'm the way. He's getting people's eyes on Jesus. By the way, this is in your bulletin today, this chart, if that'd be helpful for you. Gospelization. That's an important part of making disciples of one another. Association. This is the notion of just casual and meaningful time with one another. I have a friend, and I've shared this with some of you guys before. I have a friend, and I was talking to him on the phone several months ago, or maybe a year And he said, yeah, I'm discipling these guys on Thursday nights, and he was just kind of rambled through what he was doing these days. And I thought, okay, I don't know the whole situation here, but you're discipling these guys on Thursday nights. It almost makes it sound like discipleship has been relegated to this meeting once a week on Thursdays. And certainly that could be a part of discipleship. But Jesus didn't meet with guys merely once a week on Thursdays, did he? Jesus, lived life with people. He spent a lot of time with people. John 1:38 and 39. Jesus turned and saw them following, and he said to them, "What are you seeking?" And they said to him, "Rabbi," which means teacher, "where are you staying?" He said to them, "Come, and you will see." So they came and saw where he was staying, and they stayed with him that day. They just spent time with Jesus. Jesus hung out with people. It's an important part of discipleship. This is what I'm talking about. We need to hang out so that I can see how you're responding to you're shepherding your kids in this situation. People hung out with Jesus, and they learned from him. Matthew 9:10, as Jesus reclined at a table in the house, behold, many tax collectors and sinners came, and they were reclining with Jesus and his disciples. They're hanging out having dinner. He's having dinner with tax collectors and sinners. Jesus simply spent time with people, and it's an important piece of the discipleship process. That obviously ties in tightly with the whole notion of community. Right? Association. Gospelization, we're speaking truth into one another's lives, and we're doing it in the context of living life together. Association. Demonstration. This is the notion of modeling and observing and learning from one another's lives. We're demonstrating what it looks like. We don't just know what Pastor talked about on Sunday. We're living it out, and people then come and live their life next to our lives, and the life that we live becomes a model of what that actually looks like. And some of us are bad models, and some of us are good models, and so we need to spend some time together so that we can make disciples of one another. Jesus was praying in a certain place, and when he finished, one of his disciples said to him, "Lord, teach us to pray, as John taught his disciples." And he said to them, "When you pray, say, Father, hallowed be your name." He modeled, he demonstrated for his disciples. He not only told them what to do, but he showed them how to do it. That's an important piece of the discipleship process as well. Obviously, the washing of the disciples' feet. I have given you an example that you should do as I have done to you. Education. Growing in our biblical knowledge of God together. This is usually what we think of as discipling others. And it's usually what we exclusively think of in the discipleship of others. We're going to go through a study together. We're going to read some theology together. We're going to read through the Bible together. And of course, I think this is probably the most important piece of discipleship, honestly. But what I'm saying is it's only one piece of discipleship. Jesus, of course, was a master teacher, and he did it continuously through his ministry. Mark 10:1, he left there and went to the region of Judea and beyond the Jordan, and crowds gathered to him again. And again, as was his custom, he taught them. It was his custom to teach. He was an educator. We care about education a lot in the context of all these other things. Participation. This is the notion of actively serving the church and others. Living in community, making disciples. It's not a spectator sport. We have to invest. We have to serve the church, serving other people. Obviously, Jesus was giving his disciples opportunities to take a crack at it on multiple occasions. He called the 12 together, gave them power and authority over demons, to cure diseases, and he sent them out to proclaim the kingdom of God and to heal. So they were participating in the ministry as well. Cultivation. I've got two more, and I'm almost done here, guys. Cultivation. This is just providing one another with truthful feedback, correction, encouragement, etc. This is following up with people. This is like when you see something in somebody else's life, and they're like moving towards self-destruction, you move in and you help them. You don't just let them self-destruct and not say anything. This is coaching one another. This is giving encouragement to one another. Jesus obviously did this. I love this scene. Here's Jesus cultivating his disciples. They came to Capernaum, and when he was in the house, he asked them, "What were you discussing on the way?" But they kept silent, for on the way they had argued with one another about who was the greatest. And Jesus is like, "Okay, I need to like step into this situation and do a little cultivation, a little bit of coaching, get some feedback." Some cultivation with Peter, after Peter denies Jesus, and then Jesus meets him on the shores in the last chapter of John, second to last chapter, the end of John, and Jesus reinstates Peter, and this is in some ways addressing the problem, but placing balm on the wound. This is what I mean by cultivation. And then finally, multiplication, which just means if we're going to be we need to be mindful of passing the baton to others, giving other people the opportunity to run with it from here. And so discipleship then is this holistic thing where we're speaking gospel truth into one another's lives because we're associating, we're spending time with one another, and we're demonstrating, we're showing one another what it looks like, and we're educating, we're looking at God's Word together, and we're participating, we're all taking a crack at it, and we're cultivating, we're giving feedback to one another, and we're multiplying. And that doesn't have to be a tight method. It's just something to be mindful of. Think about the people that you're called to invest in. Think about your spouse, for those of you who have spouses. Think about your coworker, if you're thinking, I need to invest in a coworker. Think about that person in the gospel community and run through this right now and say, what do I need? What should we do? What would I do to pursue this person's advancement in the Lord? Maybe we just need to hang out together. Maybe we should read a book together. Maybe there are some things in their life that I feel like I need to provide some encouragement for. This just gives you some guiding principles. So those are 3 concepts I'm asking for buy-in on. We're going to figure out how to do this. The community context, an investment mentality, guiding principles. And the result, I think, will be disciples with a passion for Jesus. And I want you to do this with me. And I don't want you to do it because you feel guilty. Like, I'm feeling really guilty this morning. Not bought in. I don't want you to feel guilty. We don't want gospel communities full of people who are bitter because they've been guilted into buying in to community, something like that. It's about recognizing what God is doing. What is God doing in the world? What is God doing in Fort Collins? What is God doing in Choice City Church? What is God doing in your life by bringing you here? And it's about getting on board, not because you feel guilty, but because you want to live for something great. I want to live for something great with you guys, together with you guys. Let's do this. Let's pour in to what God is doing by pouring into one another's lives. And let's get on board with this. And it's not even about stirring your own heart as though you or I are the initiators here. Remember, this wasn't our idea, that wasn't our zeal that brought us here. It was the Lord who said, you have no idea what I have for your life, but I'm sucking you into this plan, and I've got a mission, and I'm going to bring you on board, and together with me, let's recognize it, and let's be a part of it. If He brought us in, then He can give us the strength to live it out. It's just a fundamental presupposition. If the Lord is calling you to do it, the Lord can give you the strength to live it out together with us. So let's buy in, and let's get on board, and let's buckle up, because I think it's going to be amazing what God would do with Choice City Church.